Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's my great pleasure to be here with the Dr. Eadeses, Mike and Mary Dan Eades, and we're going to wait just a few minutes for people to get on the live. But again, what a thrill! My teachers, they don't know that, but I'm going to tell them that, of course. And then also a little frustration I had some years ago. But anyway, I'm Dr. Eric Westman. I'm a professor of internal medicine at Duke University, past president of the Obesity Medicine Association, and still in practice, loving how we can reverse metabolic disease, improve people's lives in a medical setting without medications. And I'm just, again, going to wait. I have a few hellos from Mexico, from all over. And yes, there will be some questions, time for questions. I get the first few. I have the first few questions, but I would like to leave a lot of time, if that's okay with you, to do some questions from the audience. If they're not too hard, that's
just the easy ones.
Oh gosh, you guys have answered so many questions, including in the course. And I have to say, we're going to end up on the live today talking about the protein course that you've put together. And it's my great pleasure at the Adapt Your Life Academy to be a part of this, to get this information out. So again, welcome. And I'd like to dive right in. In 1998, when two patients came to me at the VA hospital in Durham, North Carolina, they lost weight without me doing anything. And I had sent all my patients to the dietitian, and no one seemed to lose weight. But these two people came to me having lost over 50 pounds on their own. Can you imagine the nerve? they didn't need a doctor. And so I asked them what they did, and they politely told me that they read a book, and the book was written before you were born, and that really got my goat. I started learning, and so I went out to read the books that they had read, and one was Protein Power that you guys wrote. One was the Atkins New Diet Revolution that was republished, and I was trying to learn on my own without any nutritional training, without training in weight loss, which is kind of the norm even today among doctors. But when I was looking around, Dr. Atkins was the only one in a clinic. And so I confess I didn't contact you because you didn't have a clinic anymore. You had already retired. But I learned, this is 1998. And I think what I'd like to do is start out with how you got into this, and how what I finally learned is that you had the clinic experience, which I required. If I was going to learn from somebody, I wanted to learn from another doctor. And so I'm sorry I went to Dr. Atkins' office instead of yours, but it's only because you'd already retired. But if you think about it, that was 25 years ago. Yeah. And you guys at least had retired from the clinical practice, and you look like you haven't even retired yet. So fantastic. It must be the protein eating and the low carb living. So there are enough people on. Welcome everybody, and we'll get to your questions in just a minute. But so please tell us how you got involved in this, where your practice was, how long you practiced, and because I think that's just a wonderful story.
Well,
it started with a kernel of popcorn,
which was me.
Which was him. Ever seen popcorn? Like that?
Yeah. I had been thin really all my life, and then all of a sudden, in my kind of early to mid 30s, I just exploded into obesity. I mean, I wasn't morbidly obese or anything, but I was way, way larger than I wanted to be, and I ever had been. And so I started fooling around trying to, fiddle with my own weight loss. And I ended up
while working full time as a doctor.
Yeah, while working full time as a doctor. And
general practice.
At the time, we had developed one of the first chains of what are now called urgent care centers anywhere in the country. And we did that in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we had 4 of them. And at that time, there was some hostility with the medical community because they thought we were stealing patients. And And, it was just anything new in medicine is sort of automatically
Threatening.
greeted with hostility.
Threatening.
And so we had these 4 clinics, and suddenly I was overweight, and they had basically just turned out to be kind of 4 family practice clinics where you didn't need an appointment. But I was working in one, she was working in one, a couple other doctors we had worked in the others, and then we filled in with other locum tenens doctors. But during this time, I had all of a sudden gained a lot of weight. And so I started, I got one of these fasting programs that you could do in the clinic, and I went on it myself. And I lost all this weight. And when I read all the materials that came with it, it said that, it was kind of reminiscent of Dr. Atkins' book, which I'd read years before.
The first one, not the new one.
Right. And when I saw that, and then at the end of the thing, it said you need to go back on a low-fat, high carb diet. And I thought, well, that's kind of nonsense. But, if this works so well on the front end, why wouldn't it continue to work? And so, meanwhile, I went back on just a regular whole foods diet. But during this whole thing, patients had seen me lose weight, and they wondered how I did it and wanted to do it. And I started saying, well, I can help you, and started working with them and feeling my way through it. And that's kind of the beginning of it. And then once I switched myself over to this whole food, low carb diet, I thought, what do you need all the shakes and everything? Let's just go on a low carb diet. And so I started putting people on low carb diets. And this was during the time when everybody was scared to death of cholesterol. And so that of course is, the first question on everyone's lips. Well, what's going to happen to my cholesterol? And so I, checked their labs, and their cholesterol really almost in 100% of the cases did better. And so I started really looking into kind of the mechanism of weight gain and obesity. And I went back to my actual medical school biochemistry book, and I went through all the diagrams, I lined everything out, and it became pretty clear that insulin was a driving force behind it, and that, insulin made you fat, insulin kind of kept fat in the fat cells. And so I decided if you can lower insulin, you ought to lose weight. And the only way really you can lower it is with a low carb diet, because there really aren't any insulin lowering pills. You just got to take away the stimulus. So that's what I did.
It makes such sense.
Yeah. And I had a pretty good success, but I still had this niggling doubt because of the cholesterol and the fat issues. And then all of a sudden, in the space of a short period of time, 4 patients came to see me that really changed the way I thought about everything. The first one she sent to me from her clinic, and it was a lady that was mid-30s lady, and she had triglycerides of about, 2,500, which is the highest I'd ever seen at that time. And so high that you really couldn't determine some of the other lipid parameters. And so I took her on as a test case, because I figured, she's premenopausal, chances of a heart attack are really negligible. So I'm going to go full bore with her and put her on, steak and salad. And I talked to her. Well, the first thing I did when she came to see me was recheck her lab, because as there are a lot of screw ups on labs. And when I saw something that out of whack, I wanted to recheck it and make sure it was a legitimate number, which I did, and it was. And so I put her on basically a steak and green vegetable and salad diet.
And eggs and green vegetables,
right,
and cheese.
And cheese, yeah. And I actually gave her my beeper number, because I was kind of concerned about it. I said, call if you have any problems. And I had her come back in 3 weeks. She came back in 3 weeks. She had done great. I rechecked her labs in 3 weeks, and her triglycerides had virtually normalized. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe it.
They were 100 and something.
Yeah. And all of her lipid values were apparent. She felt better. She had lost weight. And so that gave me some confidence. Another lady who came in, and this was just at the beginnings of statins. And this lady came in, and her total cholesterol was 700, which I don't think to this day I've seen another one like that. But her total cholesterol was 700. And she was an elderly lady and was the mother of a friend of mine. And so I talked to her about the diet, and she went on it. Same thing. I rechecked her in a few weeks. Everything had normalized. And then I had kind of a famous Little Rock person come in who was a female. Same thing. Her lipid values were they all came in because they wanted to lose weight. but their lipid, these are people whose lipid values were kind of crazy. And her lipid values completely normalized. And then the final one that came in was actually a friend of mine who ran an ad agency, who was about 58 years old and was just needed an insurance physical. So I did that for him and checked his blood work as part of it. And he said, and by the way, while I'm here, how can I lose this little pot belly?
Wasn't much of one.
Yeah, not much of one. And so I kind of told him the diet, and he went away. And I got his lab work back. I think he came in on a Thursday or Friday. I got his lab work back, came in over the weekend. I saw it on Monday. And his lipid values were out of the
Through the roof.
yeah, I mean, through the roof. And so I
Except
thought,
it's HDL.
so
Which is low.
so I called him. I called his office to say, hey, let's talk about this diet, because he was a middle-aged male in the age bracket that can, prone to have a heart attack. And they said, oh, well, he's gone on a cruise. He's going to be gone for 10 days. And I thought, okay, he's on a cruise. He didn't start this diet on a cruise, so I'm safe. When he comes, I said, tell him to call me the minute he gets back. When he gets back from the diet, he calls and said, hey, what's up? I said, how are you doing? He said, great. I went on this cruise and I followed your diet, the whole thing. It was really easy. I ate a lot of seafood, a lot of meat. I avoided all the other stuff. It was great. And I've lost, 3 or 4 or 5 pounds, whatever it was. And I told him about his lab values. I said, let's come in and look at those again. And when he came in, this was 11 days later. This is the soonest I've ever checked anyone. And when he did, they were completely normal. And then I started reading a little bit more about statins and a little bit more about the cholesterol pathway, which I, of course, memorized in biochemistry and immediately forgotten. And I realized that HMG coenzyme A reductase, rate-limiting enzyme in the cholesterol synthesis pathway, and the same enzyme that statins block, actually is stimulated by insulin. So it made sense that if you lowered insulin levels, you were going to take some of the stimulation away from that enzyme, and that lipid values should normalize. And once I had those patients under my belt, then I was fearless. And so I put everybody on the program from that point on, and I've never had a problem.
Yeah, so Mary Dan, were you a little harder to convince?
Oh no, actually, I was fairly convinced, because he had written a book at just about that time, based on the protein sparing modified fasting program that we had done, because we saw so many people in all of our clinics. People would come in to be rechecked on this program that he was doing, and they all did so well. And it sort of occurred to him mainly that the need for weekly monitoring and all of the cost of those programs, which was thousands and thousands of dollars, for monitoring on them, was maybe not as necessary as it had seemed, because everybody really did. If they followed the instructions, they did really well. And so he decided, people could do this on their own. And how many people would that open it up to who can't afford it, can't possibly afford a hospital-based program or even a clinic-based program? And so he wrote a book, his first book, actually, without me, the only one he's written without me, that was called Thin So Fast. And that came out in 1989. And it told people how to undertake a protein-sparing modified fast with a slight modification. We gave them one food meal at night. We'll make sure that they had enough fat to keep their gallbladder working and stuff like that. But he wrote that book, and we'd seen a lot of good success. And then when he started doing just a full food only program, those 4 patients, for me too, that was okay. This kind of runs the gamut. It's men, it's women, it's at ages that we should maybe worry about, and everybody's doing really well. And so it gives you a lot of confidence, since like you, we didn't get any medical nutritional training. I mean, I think we had one class in med school that was a 3-hour class, and I don't mean a 3-credit hour class. I mean a 3-hour lecture, one 3-hour lecture. And beyond that, what you were taught to do is write orders. Put this patient on a low-fat diet and send it to the dietitian or, dietetic service. Put this patient on a low cholesterol program or a low salt program or whatever. We knew nothing about nutrition from our medical training, and all of it came just digging it out, paper by paper. He spent half his life, it seemed, in the medical library back in the stacks, because in the olden days, when in the very olden days, there was no such thing as this internet I hear talk of, where you could just with the click of a few keystrokes, pull up every paper known to mankind. And that wasn't the way it was back then.
So you're most known in the pop culture with the book, The Protein Power. I think it sold millions of copies. And what I love about that is when I think about nutrition, how to teach it, the first place I start is let's consider what we're made of. What is a human made of? And so occasionally I'll ask medical students or residents or visiting doctors just to see how much they know or don't know. What are humans made of? And I'll point to the muscle and the bone, and sure enough, a student recently looked at me and said, "What we're made? We're made of sugar." Oh my Lord! So yeah, you can't expect the. But so if you just start with the brass or the basics of what are we made of? Protein, and we need to eat protein. The brilliance of the name Protein Power has really stood the test of time. A lot of people, there were often the fats and the keto this, keto that. And although I named our clinic Keto Medicine Clinic based on the keto metabolism, I didn't think couldn't name a clinic the Protein Clinic. I mean, what's medical? What's medical about that? But so how did the Protein Power book then come about?
And it's kind of strange. We sat down. In fact, I just ran across this the other day because we're going through a lot of junk, throwing it away. But we had about probably 5 or 6 pages of titles proposed for this book because nobody could come up with a title.
Its original title was The Insulin Connection.
Yeah, with The Insulin Connection, and the publisher says, everybody will think it's about diabetes.
Boring.
Yeah, everybody will think it's about diabetes.
There was a movie then, The French Connection. That's kind of
right. And that's why I liked it. And so, but they said, everybody will think it's about diabetes, and they won't buy it unless they have diabetes. So anyway, we had this 5 or 6 pages of just one title after another. And we sent them all off to the publisher, and the publisher went through one of the titles was Protein Power, and the publisher picked that. And we were, strangely enough, kind of unhappy about it because we thought a lot of the other titles were better. And it just, it had the alliteration, Protein Power and all that. And as it turned out, it was a great title. And so they were smarter than I was.
Well, they were.
And you
dissed those very people today, but in your newsletter, the thing about the Protein Power part was that everybody would refer to our diet as a high protein diet, and it's really not a high protein diet. It's a amount of protein that you need diet, which is higher than a lot of people think. But we were concerned that if it was called Protein Power, that we were just going to draw all kinds of fire for recommending that people get on a high protein diet, because everybody knows those high protein diets are going to corrode your kidneys and cause cancer and God knows what else. And of course, none of that is true, but we didn't really relish going all over the country having to defend it. And as it turned out, they did ask questions about it, the talking heads that had never read the book and that read the front cover of the fly jacket of the book, and then that's what they asked the questions on. But they did talk about it a little bit, and that's what we would always answer. It's not really a high protein diet; it's the amount of protein you need diet,
which is more than most people get.
Which is more than most people get, and more than they think.
Time has passed, and I think a lot of lawyers have been involved. The Verta company basically comes up with adequate protein now, is the language, right? Adequate protein, but you couldn't say fat power at the time, right?
No. At the time, we'd have been ridden out of town on a rail if we'd have called it fat power.
Although we did have some of the titles involved fat.
Yes, and the suggestions that we had, but we did get that one a lot. Living is just a high fat diet, and what's the percentage of fat in this diet? And we both sat there knowing, it's 65, 70%, and we're not going to say that out loud because these people will kill us if we say, well, it's just 70% fat diet.
Yeah, one time I was giving a talk at Colorado State University to a whole auditorium full of people. we'd been invited there by Lauren Cordain and a couple of other guys on the staff. And so I was giving this lecture about it, and we avoided this whole percentage thing because basically I don't like percentages, because you don't eat percentages, you eat grams. But I gave this talk, and somebody asked that question from the audience, and there was no way to escape it. And I hadn't even really, I knew it was high, but I hadn't thought about it. So I started thinking about how many grams of carbohydrates and what it was, and I came, that's probably about 65 to 70% fat. You can just see this collective in the audience.
Yeah, but even then, today, the language is healthy fats, and it's healthy fat. And I just go along with that. Of course, a natural fat is a healthy fat, but so there's this skirting around the idea that saturated fat is actually fine, but you can't say it. And so Protein Power was brilliant because it didn't. So it was between the rock and the heart. It went right through the language.
Walking between the two fires. Yes.
Yeah. Well. So time has passed. A lot of research now. And have you changed your so let's say someone signs up for the Adapt Your Life Academy protein course. Has there been any fundamental change in your thinking over time, or a nuance, or does protein still come first, and don't worry too much about the rest?
Yeah, I think in that regard, I would even come down more strongly that protein comes first, and that on a plate of food, it's got to be the center of the plate. It's got to be the cornerstone of a meal, and you put around it anything from nothing, if you want to go that extreme, to whatever amount of carbohydrate in fruits and vegetables that your metabolism can withstand at that point. And that may be different at different times. It's certainly going to be different for different people. But the amount of protein that a given lean body mass needs is not going to change. They need that much, and they can stop there if that makes melts if they're Sean Baker, or I use him all the time because if it's big giant steaks he eats all the time. But you can stop with just the protein if that's as far as you want to take it. But just keeping the carbs low, eating whole foods that are natural, and most of what we said in Protein Power, I think we probably changed less on the protein part of it than we have on maybe the fats part of it, and what fats would be the healthiest fats. I mean, we both knew that saturated fat was okay, but we didn't say it out loud a lot in the book.
Right. Yeah. The time.
Go ahead and eat butter and eggs, but don't talk about saturated fat.
And nobody looks to see what's in the butter. Well, right. So that's great. So now there's a lot of confusion today about protein and its effects in the body. I think one of the most common questions I get is the effect of protein and carbs on insulin, and how does the protein raising insulin, how that affects. Can you be knocked out of ketosis? Can all these harmful things? How do you look at the relative effect of these macros on glucose and insulin? How do you see that today?
Well, I see it as the whole idea is it's not a push phenomenon, it's a pull phenomenon. I mean, protein can convert to glucose. The gluconeogenic amino acids in protein can convert to glucose, and that's what happens during gluconeogenesis. So protein can definitely convert to glucose, but it's not a push phenomenon. You don't cause it by eating more protein. It's a pull phenomenon. You pull it into action if you need more glucose. I mean, you got to have a certain range of glucose, and if it drops low, and you don't have anywhere to get it because you don't have any carbs, or your glycogen levels have diminished and you need it from protein, then you pull it from protein. But by taking a lot of extra protein, you don't push it. There were a great study that I stumbled across, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago that was done back in the 1930s at the University of Michigan, where they took these medical students actually, and that was a question that they had, and they fed them a huge amount of meat, and their blood glucose didn't change at all. And so they determined even way back then that you're not going to drive blood glucose level by eating protein. And then what's her name? Gannon and his other
Frank
research person.
Yeah. Mary Gannon.
Her other research person. Yeah. Did a nice study about that a few years back that showed the same thing, that you're really not going to push it. It's a pull deal. So I never worry about that. But for some reason, somebody went out and kind of started that rumor, and now a lot of people worry about that. But I don't think it's a worry at all. That is a worry with type 1 diabetics, because they do have a problem with that. It can be a push phenomenon there, so they've got to cover it with insulin. But people that don't have type 1 diabetes, in my view, don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, excellent point. So don't worry so much about the protein that you're eating to satiety, adequate protein, raising insulin too much, essentially. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's going to be a medically type 1 diabetes issue. So other things going on today, a lot has changed. I was teaching basically what you teach, and we studied it, the clinical trials, and published it. And someone came in and said, oh my goodness, you're teaching lazy, dirty keto. And I thought, what is that? So this internet keto came out. You have to have super clean food. You have to have bulletproof coffee. You have to have all the coconut oils and all these things. And so I started to learn about the internet kind of confusion out there. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that people started coming in is I had to hit my macros. I had to get this amount and this, and I was like, what are you doing? And so what, of all of the things, do you have to calculate macros, and do you has all this stuff been helpful, or has it gotten us off track? What are you thinking?
I think for people who have a need to overanalyze and overmeasure things, it's probably wonderful, because they can, it's measurable. I can get this many macros, I'm going to do this, or it's like the people who really love the zone diet, because they can be very anal about making sure that they got their zones all matched up. And if that helps somebody stick to something, and if they need that, that's okay. But honestly, and we know, you can hand them page 4, and if they'll do it, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. So the method we use goes, back to the Banting diet, really. And it's funny it's kind of sad to see a lot of medical people conflate what we teach with the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. They're very different groups. Very different, and we don't focus on macro counting and all that. I mean, there were no apps 150 years ago. In fact, I don't think there was electricity even. So so a lot of people are concerned about that. A lot of people are wondering, can they do the carnivore diet, which can be the extreme of wolves don't have coffee, so you can't have coffee. Or it could be, a little less extreme. But I'm curious, because is there really anything in the vegetable matter that's not in the animal matter that you might eat?
So you could get by just fine, as Stefansson and colleagues proved back in the 20s. You can subsist perfectly fine and not become deficient in anything on a carnivore diet that has plenty of fat. You do need plenty of fat. You need about 70-30 or maybe 80-20 fat to protein if you're just going to eat meat. And then you will use that protein and make blood sugar out of it. It's more for variety, I think, than anything else. It's not necessarily, people have this notion that there's all these fabulous things in plants, and there are, but a lot of them aren't even available to us because they're bound. The poor plant has to try to stop predation one way or another, and it has no claws or teeth, and it can't run away. So it makes lectins and phytates and all these other things that make it less good for us to eat. So we maybe say, I don't need to eat that. But cooking has gotten around some of that and softened the fibers and made plants possible to eat, and certainly they can be tasty. But you can subsist just fine without them.
Yeah, and getting back to your original question that you ask a lot of people, what are we made of? Mm-hmm. And when you're on a carnivore diet, you're eating what we're made of. I mean, 100% what we're made of. And that's the way I kind of explain it to people. So you really can get by with it nicely. And I do it every now and then. The problem with it is it just gets a little bit boring. And I guess I haven't attuned my taste enough to where I don't want to eat anything but meat. But when I do it for a period of time, I feel better. I sleep better. I mean, everything seems to get better. You know, I'll lose weight.
But if you've reversed a serious medical problem by not eating vegetables, I mean, you'll have more of a reason.
Oh, absolutely.
Deprived. Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's fascinating to see. So it looks like, Mike, your story was one of personal use of the diet to find it. That's pretty common. And there's a young medical student at Harvard now, Nick Norwitz, who basically fixed his own ulcerative colitis. And, you know, I don't think he's going to say carnivore is boring, because there's nothing worse than a severe case of ulcerative colitis. If anyone's gone through training. So, you know, if someone has cured, reversed is the language also that Verda used. I watched their language very carefully. You know, it's adequate protein, it's reversing diabetes. And that's great. So now let's get into how much protein. A lot of questions I get. You know, can you eat too much protein so that you can't absorb it all, like in one meal? You know, so that's a common myth out there. All right.
It's a myth. I mean, you can only actually probably make use a certain amount for protein synthesis, and beyond that, it's just going to go into the amino acid pool and maybe not be used right away, but you know, you'll absorb it and you can use it. And it's so satiating, particularly if it's fatty protein, that it's kind of hard to eat too much of it. If you just eat to satiety, you're probably getting about the right amount that you need, and you shouldn't worry about it.
It's sort of the cohort that I always think of in terms of protein consumption or excess protein consumption are bodybuilders. Because they eat enormous amounts of protein, vastly more than any of us would ever think about eating. And they do it on a regular basis. And as I always say to people who, you know, wonder if protein causes kidney problems, I say, you know, are there lines of bodybuilders at the dialysis centers? And there aren't. I mean, it doesn't bother their kidneys. They're able to process it just fine. And so I'm not sure, you know, what there may be a limit on the amount of protein that you can eat, but I don't know what it is.
I think there's a limit to the amount that you can eat lean, not necessarily in grams, but just you get, that happened with Stephenson. They put him on a very, very lean meat diet, and he was getting so much protein and so little fat that it made him, you know, kind of upset his GI tract, and he had some issues there. And basically he said to them, "You've got to give me more fat." And so when they got the diet to about an 80-20 percentage of fat to protein, then he gets fine. He was probably eating as much as he'd been eating before, but he, well, maybe not quite, because they were trying to keep his calories up. But it's not about, I think it's more about the balance there than it is about the protein itself.
You know, I have a memory. And I just want, for the people who are just watching, of course, this is Dr. Mike and Mary Dan Eades, who wrote the book Protein Power. Millions of copies sold. They've been teaching ever since. And you've gone to meetings, you've given lectures based on all this. And I will never forget, I helped to bring a debate between, I think it was you, Mike, and Ron Rosedale. So now that low carb is set, you know, of course, this was, you know, if low carb is great, should it be low carb focused on protein? Should it be low carb focused on fat? And it was at that meeting, I can't even remember where I was, where you showed this slide of nobody lined up at the dialysis center from the bodybuilders. And I thought, of all the things, that was just a little too harsh for me to take. It was like, it was charlatan. It was quackery. It was, but it's the truth, you know. You would find all these people having trouble, and then, you know, so I would look for data on dialysis and bodybuilders and found nothing. So anyway, you had a great way of showing what was really happening in front of our faces, as opposed to what's supposed to happen. And I think I remember Ron was really disorganized. I think he forgot all the slides that time, and it was, he just talked off the cuff. So anyway, again, thank you for teaching at our meetings and teaching me. And let me get to some other questions. Michelle asks, is it okay to have 3 scrambled eggs and 1 1/2 scoops of unflavored whey protein isolate in water for breakfast?
Three scrambled eggs and protein and water, not all together, I'm assuming. Just 3 scrambled eggs and then some protein isolate and water.
Sure. For breakfast.
Yeah.
As a shake.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
sure. If you don't want more eggs.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Someone asked me what is the local brisket in our area. It's City Barbecue brisket. I get no kickback, and it's just my personal favorite because it's so fat inside and the edge is all. Anyway, I bet you cook a mean Arkansas brisket.
Brisket is good.
Yeah, I like brisket because it is fatty. I love it.
Let's see. I was just reading The Arrow, a subscriber.
Thank you.
Wait, what's The Arrow?
That's his newsletter. That's his weekly newsletter.
Comes out every Thursday.
What did somebody
late
say?
in the afternoon.
The best one, the best Thursday afternoon newsletter.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And let's see, a lot of welcomes from all over the world and country. And let's see. Bob asks, Dr. Eades, wanting to preserve as much lean body mass as possible as my wife and I age. So should we err to the upper side of recommended protein levels?
Yes,
sir. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely should. And there's nothing, as we say all the time, your lean body mass is like your IRA. That's your retirement account, because the bigger and more robust your lean body mass is, the more gracefully you're going to age, and the healthier you'll be and the stronger you'll be, both physically and cognitively, and the longer you'll live.
Yeah, it correlates with longevity, and it's really incredibly important, and it's difficult to do. And if you
as you age, and by age we mean like over 30.
Yeah, I mean it kind of 30 is a rough break point, but somewhere in there. And every year, every decade, it gets progressively harder to do. And you can lose muscle really easily if you're inactive. You can really lose it easily if you're hospitalized. And so it's always good to have a little bit extra. And you can, and the only way you can maintain protein as you age, or muscle as you age, is to eat protein, good quality protein, mainly animal protein, eat a fair amount of it, and do resistance exercise. And if you do that, you're gonna have your muscle mass as good as it can be,
and your bone mass.
And your bone mass.
Because you got to remember, lean body is not just muscles either. Lean body is organs. Your liver and your lungs and your brain and your heart, especially those all are part of the lean body, and your bones.
And your bones are built on a protein kind of a template, so you need to have protein even for your bones. You think of it as calcium, but you really need protein. And it's just, there's almost nothing more important as you age than maintaining your lean body mass and maintaining or building your muscle mass. Because when that's gone, it is incredibly difficult to get it back. Dr. Westman can vouch for he's taking care of a lot of sick people in the hospital, and when they lay there in bed for 6 or 7 days languishing because they've got pneumonia or whatever, it takes a lot out of them, not just the disease, but just the muscle loss from inactivity. And so it's so important to have that reserve, that reservoir, as you get older. And the only way you can do it is to keep your protein intake up and keep your and do resistance exercise.
Muscles against a load.
Thanks.
It can be a body weight load, or it can be an iron load. Yeah. Your choice.
Fantastic.
Or a band load.
Judy asks, switching gears a little bit, and I have to say, watching, I got into this for obesity treatment, and as a lot of us did, but I saw two of my patients did it. It wasn't my own personal journey, although I've used it ever since, the low carb keto diet. Something that kind of popped up that again, was sort of a relearning from the old, was the cancer idea, the keto cancer and that connection, and very interesting research going on today. The question is, are there any types of cancers that shouldn't be using a carnivore diet to treat, or as an adjunct, or once you've been diagnosed?
There probably are, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah, nor can I. And since I don't really know, I don't want to
speculate.
just make some sort of
I know some that do
proclamation.
very well.
Well, I gave you
glioblastoma being one, but
I gave you first crack at it. I think, I don't know of any. I mean, the main thing you want to do is keep insulin low, right? It's
Right.
sort of the insulin-like growth factor, those sorts of things, and then
apparently are a few cancers that mutations of them that can learn to use glutamate or some other amino acid, and so those are ones that you'd really have to. You might go for that ketogenic children's seizure diet and really keep protein low if that were the case. But mostly, cancers love sugar. They grow on sugar. They are fermentive. They've lost their ability to respire, and they ferment, and they ferment sugar. And as a consequence, if you keep that away from them and keep your blood sugar low and feed yourself with fat and turn it into ketones and let your brain and your heart and everything run on ketones, then you kind of starve the cancer, and that's the theory behind it. And I can say for my part, if somebody told me tomorrow I had cancer, it's the first thing I'd do is go on a very low carb diet. I would immediately do that, and I live on a pretty low carb diet anyway, but which I hope is going to keep me from ever having it. I don't know if that's true.
But it's a complex and tricky thing, and if I did come down with cancer, I would put myself in the hands of somebody who's really skilled in treating it with a ketogenic diet, because there are lots of. It's not just, I got cancer, so I'm going to go on a ketogenic diet and live forever. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of nuances that have to be dealt with, and to do it all properly. I mean, not just the diet. There are drugs you can take. There are other things you can do. And so if you happen to be in that situation, or if I did, I would get myself in the hands of someone who was really skilled at doing that.
I think it's one instance where you might want to measure the blood ketones. But so much to learn about that, and cancer is such an insurmountable fortress that, in fact, when Jeff Volek at Ohio State, he was at UConn years ago and had done great research on low carb diets. He moved to Ohio State, and they allowed him to kind of choose the topic that he wanted to study, and he just is studying a lot of cancer. And I'm like, Jeff, it's such a tough problem to fix, but they're looking at it, and I'm humbled by just how difficult cancer is as a disease. I'm much more cavalier about reversing diabetes, obesity, GERD, no problem, all those things. But so I think Judy, you're getting the answer that there's a lot to be learned about this.
And I do definitely think cancer is a metabolic disorder and not just not a genetic disorder. And I think that you're going to have a lot more success treating it that way. But there's just a whole lot of work that's still left to be done to really pinpoint exactly what to do.
So here's a quick, Jeannie asks, keto or carnivore, best for weight loss?
Well, I think, honestly, probably carnivore will get you there a little faster if you'll stick with it. I mean, if it's okay for you, I think it truly is probably faster.
Because it's lower in carbs.
I would concur.
Because it's lower in carbs. As low as you can go.
I mean, one of the things, kind of the conclusion that I came to a long time ago, is that the vast engine of weight loss is the carb restriction. And you can do all kinds of different things, but it's the carb restriction that does the heavy lifting. And you can fiddle around with the types of fat that you eat. You can fiddle around with everything you eat and do pure and do this and do that. But it's basically the carb restriction that does the work. And when we're in practice, we had all of our patients fill out diet diaries, and they would come in every week, and we'd kind of review them, especially if they were having a problem. And some people just went on awful diets, what you consider awful diets in terms of what they ate. As long as they restricted the carbs, they seemed to do well. And so to me, that's the big engine, and all these other things are just they're the trim tabs on the plane. The reducing the carbs are the big control surfaces on the plane that really make it do what you want it to do. And the trim tabs kind of help a little bit.
You can kind of get wrapped around the axle about whether do I have to have grass-fed beef, and all these little permutations. Does it have to be organic? Does it, all of that stuff's nice, but truly, if you just get when we wrote the book, the Protein Power Life Plan, which was the follow-up book in 2000 to Protein Power, we set up these 3 different, what we call different levels of devotion to commitment to doing the diet. And the very first one we called the hedonist, and it truly was like page 4 from your book. It was just cut the carbs, get enough protein, eat the fat, just cut the carbs. I don't care what else you do. And then we had a real extreme end that we called the purist, for people who either needed, because of some, like people who might react to various lectins in plants, and they have joint complaints or gut complaints or whatever. And so, getting really down to practically a carnivore diet, a very low carb, very pure diet might be important for them. And then there's those people in the middle, which we would call us most of the time, which we name dilettantes, because they did a pretty good job at keeping their carbs down, but they did like coffee and wine. So they weren't purists.
And Irish whiskey.
And Irish whiskey or Scotch. But anyway, so that was kind of 3 levels of commitment to how far you needed to go, and they all work.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I have a hello from the organizers of Low Carb Ottawa, Wendy and Arthur. Hello. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Special shout out to meeting organizers. What a labor of love. It's so hard to do.
No doubt.
Carol asks, in your book, Protein Power, you say that some people are sensitive to arachidonic acid in red meat and egg yolks. My blood pressure is being stubborn. Are there changes to your advice to determine whether this could be my problem?
We're working on a redo of Protein Power. It's going to be called Protein Power 2.0. It's an upgrade, and we went back and went through it and just decided to rewrite the thing. And so we're in the throes of doing that. The one chapter that I would definitely get rid of is that whole chapter on eicosanoids and arachidonic acid and all that, because I don't think that's, in my view, lived up to its billing. At that time,
it didn't stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Right. At that time, I was kind of under the evil influence of Barry Sears.
Yes.
We had been good friends with Barry for years and years and years. And he was pretty persuasive about that. And we were always on the lecture circuit with him at the same time. And so we would always go back and forth about it. And I listened to his lecture on eicosanoids a million times. And so I thought, that sounds reasonable. But the whole thing is all these pathways that you look at in the eicosanoid sort of pathway from the raw materials to where you get down to the things that actually do things, those are all these pathways are driven by either inhibited or enhanced by insulin and glucagon. So you can actually change all that just by lowering your insulin and increasing your glucagon. And you don't have to screw around with all the fatty acids and all that stuff, trying to get just the right mixture of this and that to get the proper end products, the prostaglandins and prostacyclins that you're wanting to get. You can do all that just by keeping your insulin low. So that's a chapter I would ditch. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. But
I think
there would be no reason not to go off of it. Just an N of 1 trial. Go off of it for 3 weeks, eliminate it, see if it makes a difference for you. And if it does, I'm not sure I know why, but who cares if it makes a difference?
You know, this is the kind of advice for those listening from doctors who are in practice, who realize that you're not taught everything in books. And internet influencers, what it kind of just gets me is that internet influencers don't really, what they say doesn't have to work, or it only has to work in
No.
a few people. And so, the idea of trying trial and error within reason is something that certainly any clinical practitioner would have. That I love it. So Jennifer asks, I get back to protein. I eat 120 grams of protein daily, yet my blood work shows low protein. Now, I wonder, let's say it was total protein or albumin. How can I better absorb protein, and what should she think about?
I wouldn't think it would be a matter of protein absorption myself.
It's animal protein, right? Not plant protein.
Right. Or did you just say protein?
I don't know, but let's say it's animal protein.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
that's a pretty good slide.
Yeah, for almost anybody, especially a female. They're usually smaller, lean body mass, and I would think it would be something not having to do with protein absorption.
Yeah, there may be something else, and I'm not sure what that would be.
Jennifer, I check in with your doctor on that one, and I've learned that I get certain chatter from my patients, and I'm sure you had learned from people you had seen. And if someone comes in with something that I've never heard before, I kind of think to myself, no, it's something else. It's not the diet doing it.
Right.
So I kind of have a good feel for what should be happening, like less bowel movements, less frequently, that sort of thing. But, now, are you into the? I just reviewed at my YouTube channel. I'm doing a lot of reacts videos. They're pretty popular, where I'm calling out some just crazy people who say keto kills you, and I basically pick apart the argument, or and say where's the evidence for that. But there's one thing that did catch my eye, and that's the idea that the ferritin level can go up in people who eat carnivore specifically. And although I've never systematically checked in my patients the carnivore or the ferritin levels, but there's first, what do you make of that? And what I'm thinking is that it really doesn't mean you have iron overload if your ferritin's high. But have you seen that in your practice?
I wouldn't think so. What I would check first would be to see if they do a gene panel and see if they're heterozygous for hemochromatosis. Because people who are heterozygous for that tend to have elevated ferritin levels. That'd be the first thing I would check. And
the other thing that you have to remember about ferritin is that it's very volatile. And if you've had a cold or a little anything like that, a little infection of some sort, systemically, and you get your ferritin levels checked, they're going to be through the roof, because your body sequesters iron in the ferritin granules to keep it away from the bugs that are trying to make you sick. And so even with just a virus, a stomach virus or a head cold or something like that, your ferritin's not going to reflect your actual stores of iron. And that's why you probably need to get not just the ferritin, but a total iron binding capacity, that whole panel, so that you kind of make sense of it, because then you can see, oh, this ferritin's been pulled into the granules. I mean, this iron's been pulled into the ferritin granules to get it away from whatever invader was trying to. That's just a part of the normal immune system.
And check the genetics for hemochromatosis.
Yeah. And that's just uncommon enough that most doctors don't know what to do. It's
right.
And one of the things too,
you check it regularly in that patient.
One of the that was part of our regular blood panel. But one of the things that that I thought of a while back is that giving blood is good for you. There are a lot of studies out there that show. I mean, I don't think there are not many definitive studies, but people who give blood seem to be healthier and live longer. And I don't know if that's kind of the healthy user effect, because healthy people tend to do that more than non-healthy people. But anyway, I don't think giving blood hurts you, and it's going to help a lot of other people. And if you do have a little bit of an iron problem, that's gonna solve it. And when I got to thinking about that, I thought, in ancient days, in our Paleolithic ancestors, and that's when we cut our genetic teeth. I mean, we've just been the way we are now for an eye blink of time. And mainly our genes have been laid down over the millennia, where we were Paleolithic man and ate a lot of meat. We're scavengers, didn't get a lot of carbs, and so we had to have
get a lot of
we had to have a way to store and cling on to iron, because we got cut, we got dinged, we got parasites, and those were all going after our blood. So we had to develop this system to really cling on to it. And when I thought of that, I went back and started looking at some papers. And if you go and you look at chimpanzees, you look at orangutans, you look at all these animals in the wild, they all have parasites. And so there's no reason that early man wouldn't have had parasites. And parasites generally carry your blood with you. And so now, since we don't have parasites, we've got clean water and we live in sanitary conditions, and we're not eaten up with one kind of worm or another, it probably is a good thing to give blood. And that's the way I reasoned it out. And when you look at the data, it appears that that's the case. And in my view, that's the reason. So I would give blood if I had elevated ferritin and I checked everything out and there didn't seem to be a problem.
And even just give blood, even if you don't have elevated ferritin, if you're not low, because it's the one thing that you can do that is always a life-saving thing for somebody else. I think a renewable resource. Oh, and one other thing about the ferritin, the carnivores, believe I remember, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Mike, I believe I remember that heme iron is not absorbed in the intestine if their iron stores are replete.
Yeah, you can regulate your
absorption
absorption of heme iron, whereas you can't regulate your absorption of inorganic iron. So if you get iron fortified foods, and that's a problem we have, because back in the day, people didn't get enough meat, so they fortified all these things, and they've continued to fortify them with iron. And so you can't really shut that off, but you do have some control on whether or not you are going to absorb heme iron.
Which is also in meat.
Yeah, which is the type of iron in meat.
Yeah. Getting back to kind of that, now that low carb is a good idea, how do you look at the protein and fat that you eat, the ratios? Can you optimize it? Are you really concerned about it? What do you think we've learned over the last few decades?
Well, I don't think about it. I mean, if you have a good chunk of meat in your meal, you're going to be fine.
I love it. Yeah. So there's a lot of obsession about fine tuning.
Yeah.
And
I like with the grass-fed beef and those things, I think you can certainly fine tune all you want, but I would say that you get an amount of protein that is enough to nourish your lean body mass. And it's going to be at the high end of a range if you're older, for sure, or if you're very young and growing, you need plenty of protein. But you need to get fat, and then the rest of what you eat is to satiation for fat. Just have enough calories, mainly of fat calories, that you feel satisfied with that meal. And throw in a little colorful stuff if it doesn't bother you. Take it out if it does. I mean, it's just kind of infinitely adjustable to your own needs. But for most people, it's just, give me the steak and give me the salad and give me the green vegetable and off I go.
I mean, if you think of it, as you get right down to it, what we need to survive is we need stuff. We need vitamins and minerals. We need nutrients, and protein is a nutrient. And we need calories just to fuel our activity, to fuel life. And so fats are calories and proteins are, fats are calories and carbs are calories, but protein is a nutrient.
It has calories.
Right, it has calories, but you've got to have the protein because it does something for you. Whereas fat and calories, basically, there are a few essential fatty acids that you get, but those are, you don't really ever have to worry about those if you eat fat. But fat and protein are basically just calories. I mean, they're just fuel for the engine.
I said that wrong. Fat and carbs.
Or I'm sorry, fat and carbs are basically just calories, fuel for the engine. but protein is a nutrient, and that's why it's so incredibly important that you make sure to get the right amount. And all this fine tuning, geez, when we used to run around with Barry Sears, you know, we were all writing books at the same time, and he came out with his own first. And so we continued on our lecture adventures with him all over the country at the time. And Protein Power wasn't even out yet. We were doing it based on my first book.
And we moved it also over to a new publisher.
Yeah, and we moved to a new publisher. You know, all kinds of things happened. But anyway,
he got out first.
And so when we would go around and we would talk, and all these people would come up with us because they were intimidated to talk to Barry, and they would say, you know, I found out this great way that you can make ice cream zone favorable. If you take 1 scoop of ice cream and you put 6 almonds in it, it's zone favorable. And you know, and so they were always trying to to fiddle around with that and make it come out 40, 30, 30 by, you know, adding a little bit of this and taking a little bit of that away.
But you know, trying to make muffins zone favorable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy.
You know, because if you eat them with something else. And so it just,
they don't count.
Yeah. And so somehow I just thought all that was insane, all that fiddling and fine tuning.
So just to say again, you're listening to 2 doctors, well, 3 now, myself, who've worked with people across a wide range of means and ability to find food and what they eat and choose to eat. And I hope you're getting reassured that there are a million ways to go about this and to be healthy. And I'm often just kind of shocked that, you know, we have kind of like a slow cooker. It's called our stomach, you know, and, you know, nobody has a problem with a slow cooker. You put it in there and you leave it all day. And, you know, but so, you know, the timing of things, some people teach this, like you have to have an IV and have glucose in every minute of the day, like you're hooked to a gas station pump with your car going, you know, the body has a way of figuring it out if you get out of the way, right? And often what we're doing is taking away the bad fuel, if you will, and carbs. Too much carbs in the wrong hands can be a problem. And I guess my point is that the more people you deal with, the more relaxed you get about it, because you've seen people do it so many ways, right?
Right. And the more you realize that the real engine is the carb restriction.
Right.
And you know, and what people don't understand is, a lot of people don't understand, you know, you talk about gluconeogenesis, making carbs from protein, or really any of these processes in the body that go on, they're all going on all the time. It's not, okay, I'm generating glucose right now, and in 20 minutes I'll stop and I'll do. It's all going on all the time. Right. And so when you try to fool around with it, it's kind of, pointless. If you just cut the carbs and eat plenty of protein, and good quality fat, you're going to do fine. You're going to lose weight and you're going to do well.
Fantastic.
And, you can tweak it, but you know, and you may get a few percentage points of improvement, but the main improvement you're going to get is by cutting the carbs and making sure you got plenty of protein and fat. You know, well, you got to have the fat. I mean, you got to either have carbs or fat. You got to have calories somewhere.
Yeah. Fantastic. And so as I started, you've been teachers for me. Thank you so much. It's my great pleasure to announce that the protein course that you 2 wrote for the Adapt Your Life Academy is now open for enrollment. So if you go to adaptyourlifeacademy.com, you can click on getting more information or even enrolling in the protein course right now. Can you describe a little bit about the protein course, what someone might get out of it?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, you'll find out all about protein quality and where you look for foods with the best protein quality, what those are. You'll find out about how to determine how much you need of protein, how much you need to eat per meal, per day, per whatever. We'll attack a number of the myths of too much protein. We'll definitely get into the vampire myths, Mike calls them, We'll go through all of those. And we'll take a little spin through from Paleolithic times forward and talk about kind of man's quest for protein over the years and how that was sort of written into our genome from the get-go. And then what else do we talk about?
The different ways that people categorize protein.
Right. Right. How do you determine protein quality? Yeah.
And all the different ways people try to determine it over the years, because it's really been a struggle because of this difference between plant protein and or animal protein and plant protein.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot. It's everything you ever wanted to know about protein that we're afraid to ask.
Absolutely. And, you know, as I'm watching, I'm just mesmerized by your ability to teach. And having previewed the course, there are, I think, 16 videos of you guys giving the content with slides that you've put together ahead of time. So there's a content that you access immediately once you sign up for the course. And then there are also live sessions. So just like this, you can ask questions live based on what you've learned in the course. And then there are PDFs of those videos. So if you're someone who likes to read while you watch a video, Adapt Your Life Academy has this desire to allow you to learn in whatever way you learn best. So again, it's my great pleasure and thank you for putting in the effort to do this. I think it's going to teach a lot of people. Probably one of the best things that I've learned from the course is the difference between animal and plant proteins. You know, the idea that it's not all the same ilk.
That's right. They're not created equal.
Yeah. And I think, well, I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the questions. There still a few remain, but I think I got the high points, and I want to be respectful of your time tonight. Thank you so much again, not only for tonight, but for your teaching through the years. And I can't wait to see you guys again in person.
Yeah, same here.
We look forward to it.
Our pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Don't forget adaptyourlifeacademy.com. The protein course is now open for enrollment. I highly recommend this course. It's just chock full of information. And you talked about the Egyptian mummies. I knew you would. That's one of my best lectures. The best lectures. I don't want to spoil the spoiler alert, but the Egyptian mummies had atherosclerosis.
They did. On a bread diet.
Yeah. On a high carb diet.
Thanks again.
You bet.
Bye now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.